Good morning everybody, how are you all? It's Laura here from See Clear Counselling, and today on my Wednesday tea time tip I'm going to be talking about news intake and how reducing your news intake may well help to reduce your anxiety. And I'm going to talk about why we have this survival brain and how our survival brain contributes to increasing our anxiety, especially around when we watch the news. So if you're watching, please give me a little wave, say hello. Hello Alex, how are you? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura and I'm a counsellor and cognitive behavioural therapist, and I specialise in working with anxiety. I have my own private practice, See Clear Counselling, and every week I come on here on a Wednesday morning with a little tip about reducing your anxiety. And if you'd like to know more about the services that I offer, then you can always go to my website www.seeclearcounselling.co.uk. I have plenty of free resources and blogs that you can read, and you can find out more about all the services that I offer. So as I say, today we're going to be talking about the news and how reducing your news intake may be able to help reduce your anxiety. And if you have any comments or anything that you'd like to ask about what I'm talking about today, then please do put them in the comments below. And if you're watching on replay, then put #replay. It just helps me know who's watching, and it also pushes out the video to more people. Hello Lorraine, nice to see you. So, what is it about the news that increases our anxiety? Well, we are born with a brain that is wired for survival, and actually our brain is still in this primitive way of operating. So anything that feels threatening to us, dangerous to us, anything that gives us fear, will trip in this survival instinct of our brain. And when our survival instinct is tripped, then we automatically trigger what we call the fight or flight response. And the fight or flight response contributes to our anxiety and panic. So you can imagine that if we're watching a lot of news and the news is full of things that are bad about the world, we're hearing a lot of negative things on the news. We're learning about murders, rapes, wars, natural disasters, all those things that are threatening to us. And so our survival brain is automatically going to go to a place where it wants to keep us alive, and will automatically go to that fight or flight response. Now, over the last couple of years, we've been very aware of what's happening around us can make us very anxious. And even just in the last few weeks, we've had a really good example of this. The fuel shortage. You know, suddenly we were in a place where people thought there was going to be a fuel shortage, and suddenly everyone was panic buying, and we had queues outside the petrol stations. And this was a response to that survival instinct, because you can imagine in the 21st century, our cars are really important for our survival. If we don't have petrol in our car, it means we can't get to work. If we can't get to work, we can't earn the money to be able to buy our food, pay our bills, pay our mortgage, keep a roof over our head. So our survival is compromised. For many people, if they don't have fuel in their car, they can't get to the supermarket to do their shopping, and that means that they'll have no food in the cupboard. That is a real threat to our survival. So our primitive brain doesn't think about the rational, logical things that are associated with what's going on. It will automatically go to how does this affect our survival? And if our survival is at threat, then it will automatically trigger off our fight or flight response. And through the fuel shortage, that fight response was very much we could see that very much from all the people fighting back, wanting to get their fuel and panic buying, and that was the fight response coming in. So if you can imagine that perhaps you wake up every morning and you either read a newspaper or you watch the news on the telly, and instantly you're starting your day with those negative things that are happening in the world. Because newspapers and news programs almost sensationalise what is happening in the world. They want to sell papers, they want us to watch their news programme. And so we quite often find that the headlines are very much targeting us around what those negative things are going to happen and how they are going to affect us personally. And so if we wake up every morning and we either read or watch the news, we've started our day off with those negative messages about the world around us and what's happening. And instantly our brain is saying, how does that affect our survival? And if we follow that up every evening by watching the news, we're going to go to bed with all of those negative things in our head about what's happening in the world and the bad things that are going on in the world around us. And so we are automatically living in that place where our survival brain is looking at ways to be able to keep us alive. Now, people who struggle with anxiety are very often looking for safety. They want reassurance that things are 100% safe. For people with high anxiety, risk is something that is really difficult to cope with. And if we're watching lots of news and we're giving our brains lots of information about the risk that is all around us, then that is going to increase the anxiety, because our anxiety is saying, well, things aren't safe, we are at risk. People with high anxiety also very much live in the future. Very often their overthinking is taking them to the very worst case scenario. If you're an overthinker, you're probably very familiar with all that what if. Well, what if that happens? What if that would happen? And then what if? And then what if? So if you hear a bad story on the news, you can imagine your overthinking will take you into all of those what ifs. And with anxiety, what very often happens is we go into that future and we predict the very worst thing that will happen in the future, and we catastrophize about what's going to happen. Because what anxiety is doing is that survival instinct, trying to prepare us for the very worst case scenario so that we are able to survive that. But if your brain is constantly being bombarded with all of those things that could go wrong and all of those things in the future that might be dangerous to you or threatening to you, then your anxiety is constantly at work trying to keep you safe. So you can see how high news consumption feeds into high anxiety. So if you're able to reduce that news consumption, then it would kind of make sense that you're going to reduce down your anxiety, because it means that you're not living on the edge all the time looking for that threat. You're not hypervigilant to everything that's going on around you, and that means that your fight or flight response is not so likely to be triggered. And so if you can reduce your news consumption, you are not consistently feeding that survival instinct, and that should lead towards you feeling a little less calm about things and not constantly being on the edge of anxiety. So hopefully that's helped you see how reducing your news intake will actually reduce your anxiety, because you're less likely to be feeling on the edge, feeling that your survival is at risk or at threat. And that means that you're not triggering off your automatic fight or flight response. If you are triggering your fight or flight response all the time, what happens is that you're going to go into flight, which means you're going to avoid doing things, you're going to avoid going out into the world, you're going to try and avoid all these bad things that are going on around you. The fight response, like we saw with the petrol shortage, that people are going to get angry, that they might rally against what's happening in the world. Or you might go into your freeze response, which is staying safe inside your own home and feeling that you're safe and you don't want to go out into that dangerous world where your survival is at risk. So perhaps give yourself a little bit of a rest from that threat of danger, from that your survival brain constantly being triggered and your fight or flight constantly being triggered. Take a rest from the news. Don't consume news on a consistent basis, and think about reducing how often you watch the news. And give yourself time, give your body and your mind time to calm down and not be consistently on edge. It's good for us to know what's happening in the world, but that consistent messaging, that negative messaging, is what leads to that anxiety. So I hope that's helped you understand why consuming news, watching, reading, listening to the news can actually lead to increased anxiety, and actually reducing the amount of news that you intake can lead to a reduction in your anxious feelings. I hope that's been helpful to you, and if you do want to watch more of these little tea time tips, then follow me on my Facebook page, See Clear Counselling, and I'll be here every Wednesday with a little tip about reducing your anxiety. And if you want to know more about the range of services that I offer, one-to-one work, group work, courses, any of the free resources and blogs that I have, then please head over to my website, www.seeclearcounselling.co.uk. Hello Suzanne, I think you've come to us just at the end, but please do watch the video on replay, and anyone else who's watching on replay, put #replay and it just sends it out to more people. And if you've got any comments or any questions about anything that I talk about, then please do put them below. I love to interact with people and answer your questions and enjoy the comments and see how these videos have landed with you and whether they're helpful or not. And perhaps you can let me know about any other subjects that you would like me to talk about. So that's it for this week. Reduce your news intake, and reduce your anxiety. And I'll be back again next Wednesday round about 10 o'clock for another tip on reducing your anxiety. Bye for now.